Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you inspiring tales of resilience and triumph. Today, we share the story of Emma, a young girl who faced immense hardship but never gave up on her dreams. From enduring the harsh treatment of her aunt's home to discovering her strength through education, Emma's journey is a testament to the power of perseverance. Her story will remind you that no matter how difficult life gets, there's always a way out, if you never lose hope. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and start this journey with us today. Emma stepped off the dusty bus, her heart pounding with excitement. The warm evening air greeted her, carrying with it the distant hum of the bustling city. Her tiny bag, slung over her shoulder, felt heavier than usual, and in her hand, she clutched the small note her mother had given her. It contained the directions to her Aunt Rachel's house, the place where she was supposed to start a new life. Emma's mother had told her that this was a blessing, that she would be living in a big house, eating good food, and going to school just like her cousins. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a better life. She believed it. As Emma stood there in the middle of the busy street, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of anticipation in her chest. She had never been to a place like this before. The city seemed to pulse with energy. She adjusted the strap of her bag, taking a deep breath before knocking on the gate. A man appeared behind the small opening in the gate, eyeing her suspiciously. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice cold. "I'm here to see my aunt, Madam Rachel." "My name is Emma," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The man studied her from head to toe, her faded dress, her worn slippers, and without a word, he opened the gate and gestured for her to enter. Emma walked into the compound, her mouth falling open in awe. The place was vast, huge cars parked neatly along the driveway, tall gates, manicured lawns. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Before she could take it all in, the front door swung open, and there stood her Aunt Rachel, dressed in a flowing gown, her gold jewelry glinting under the porch light. But the warm welcome Emma had expected was nowhere to be found. Instead, Aunt Rachel's face twisted in displeasure as she looked at Emma. "You're just arriving now? I sent your mother transport money last week. What took you so long?" Aunt Rachel said sharply. I came as soon as I could," Emma stammered, taken aback by her aunt's coldness. "Come inside and wipe your feet. Don't dirty my floors," Aunt Rachel snapped, turning away. Emma stepped inside the house, her eyes wide in amazement. The floors were made of shining white tiles, and the air smelled of expensive perfume. The walls were adorned with elegant chandeliers that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. But despite the opulence around her, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in her chest. Her cousins sat lazily on the long couch, glued to their phones, barely sparing a glance in her direction. Then, a man entered, a tall, well-dressed figure with a scornful look in his eyes. "Emma's uncle." "Oh, the village girl has finally arrived," he said with a smirk, eyeing her like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. "I hope she won't be a liability." "She'll be useful," Aunt Rachel replied sharply, her voice cold. "Very useful." That night, Emma lay on a small mattress on the floor of a cramped room that looked more like a storage closet than a bedroom. No bed, no blanket, just the hard floor biting into her skin as she curled up. Confused, her mother had promised her that she would live like family here, that she would be loved and cared for. But from the way her aunt had spoken to her, from the way her cousins had ignored her, Emma wasn't sure anymore. Tomorrow would tell, she thought, but deep down, she already knew. This wasn't the life she had imagined. She couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the warm welcome, the promises of a better life. She lay there, the coldness of the floor seeping into her bones, the sounds of laughter and chatter from the other room filling her ears. And she realized with a sinking feeling in her chest that her mother's words, her hopes for a better future, might have been nothing more than an illusion. Would tomorrow be any different? Would things ever change? But one thing was clear to Emma: she had to be strong. She didn't know what the future held, but she couldn't let go of the small hope she carried in her heart. Tomorrow, she would face whatever came her way. The next morning came too quickly. Emma was woken by a sharp knock on the door. Wake up. Do you think this is your mother's house? Where you can sleep all day? Aunt Rachel's voice was sharp. Her tone impatient. Go to the kitchen and wash the plates before my children wake up. Emma rubbed her eyes, still aching from the hard floor she had slept on. Her body was stiff, but she quickly stood up. Her back sore from the night spent on the cold, unforgiving ground. She had barely gotten any sleep. But she knew better than to argue. Aunt Rachel's words rang in her mind. And the disappointment she had seen in her aunt's eyes the night before still lingered in her chest. She had to make herself useful. She had to prove that she belonged here, even if it seemed like she didn't. The kitchen was a sight. The sink was piled high with dirty plates, greasy pots, and leftover food. The smell of dried soup and oil filled the air, and Emma's hands trembled as she looked at the mess. Back home, she had helped her mother with the cooking and cleaning. But this was different. The sheer volume of the dishes was overwhelming. She picked up the first plate and started scrubbing, her hands moving mechanically. As she scrubbed, Emma found herself thinking about her mother's words again. You'll live in a big house, eat good food, and go to school like her children. Her mother had promised. Emma's heart ached as she thought about her mother. She was so far away, and it felt as though she was slipping away from Emma's life. Lost in this new, cold world, hours passed before she finished, her hands raw from the scrubbing. Just as she was about to sit down and catch her breath, Aunt Rachel's voice echoed from upstairs. Emma, sweep the living room and arrange the chairs. My guests are coming soon, and I don't want to see any dust. Emma sighed but picked up the broom without a word. She moved quickly, wiping down every surface, arranging the chairs just so. The house had to be spotless for the guests. But no one had asked if she had eaten. No one had checked on her. Despite the hours of work she had done, she finally snuck into the kitchen, grabbing a small piece of bread that had been left on the table. She held it in her hand, her stomach growling in protest as she brought it to her lips. Just then, the door slammed open, and a voice thundered behind her. Thief, you came to steal food now? Emma froze, her heart pounding in her chest. It was Aunt Rachel's husband, Mr. James, standing in the doorway, his face twisted in anger. No, sir. Shut up, Mr. James interrupted, his voice cold. After all the food you ate in the village, you came here to eat us dry? Drop that bread right now. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. But she didn't dare cry. Slowly, she placed the bread back on the plate, her hands trembling. Her stomach protested louder, but she swallowed her hunger along with her tears. Walking back to the tiny room she had been assigned, days turned into weeks, and Emma's life became a never-ending cycle of chores and insults. Morning till night, she scrubbed, washed, cooked, and served. Yet no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Her aunt's cold words echoed in her mind, and the constant criticism from her cousins made her feel smaller and smaller. They barely acknowledged her existence unless it was to tell her to do something else. One afternoon, as Emma was mopping the floor, her cousin Chloe walked in, chewing gum lazily, and kicked over the bucket of water. Oops, Chloe said with a smirk. Clean that up. Emma clenched her fists but said nothing. She had learned that talking back only made things worse. She simply picked up the rag and started again, her frustration rising but her mouth firmly shut. She thought about the life her mother had promised her. It seemed so far away now. Would things ever change? Would she ever be treated like family? She couldn't know for sure. But something inside her refused to give up. She had to keep going. She had to prove that she was worth more than this. No matter how hard it was, she couldn't let herself break. She would find a way to change her fate, even if it meant enduring the cruelty of her aunt's house a little longer. The days blurred together for Emma. Each morning, she woke early, forced to complete her chores before heading to school. Each night, she stayed up late, studying in the dim light, determined to catch up with the other students. The weight of her circumstances was heavy, and the exhaustion was relentless. But there was something inside Emma that refused to break. She had a quiet strength, an unspoken resolve that kept her going. She couldn't explain it, but she knew that no matter how hard life got, she couldn't give up. One evening, everything changed. It was late when the doorbell rang, and Emma was called to serve. As she moved quickly through the house, balancing a tray of drinks for her aunt's guests, she overheard a conversation between one of the guests, Mr. Adams, and her aunt. The man's voice was warm, and there was something different about the way he spoke to Aunt Rachel. "Why is she still here?" Mr. Adams asked, his tone sympathetic. "Shouldn't she be in school at her age?" Aunt Rachel scoffed. "School? Who will pay for that? She came here to work, not to waste money on schooling." The guest paused, a frown crossing his face. "That's not right. Every child deserves an education." Emma's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever spoken up for her before. It was as though she were invisible to everyone, nothing more than a servant in the eyes of her aunt and uncle. But this man, Mr. Adams, saw her. For the first time in months, Emma felt like someone cared. "I'll personally sponsor her education," Mr. Adams said, his voice firm. "You cannot refuse. It's the right thing to do." Emma couldn't believe what she had just heard. Mr. Adams was offering her a way out of this nightmare, a way to escape the suffocating life she had been living. Aunt Rachel tried to hide her displeasure, but she couldn't stop Mr. Adams. Emma couldn't breathe. Hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for so long, surged within her. The following day, everything changed. Mr. Adams arrived early the next morning, and without waiting for anyone's permission, he took Emma to the school. The principal, a strict woman with warm eyes, welcomed them both, and Emma was enrolled in a decent school. Not the most prestigious one, but a place where she could finally learn. For the first time in her life, Emma felt like she mattered. She held the new textbooks in her hands, the scent of fresh paper filling her senses. And for a moment, she could almost forget the hardships she had endured. But Aunt Rachel wasn't pleased. The day after Emma was enrolled, her aunt barely spoke to her. Yet, Emma didn't care. She had something much more significant now, an opportunity. A chance to change everything. At school, Emma worked hard. She studied with a fervor that amazed her teachers. She woke up earlier than anyone else, completing her chores before class, and then poured herself into her studies. Though the other students were faster, more knowledgeable, Emma refused to fall behind. With each passing day, she caught up. Her teachers recognized her effort and began to praise her for her determination. But back at Aunt Rachel's house, things were more difficult. Her cousins, Chloe and Sam, mocked her for going to school, taunting her with insults. They couldn't understand why she had changed, why she seemed so different. To them, she was still just a servant, someone to be used. But Emma knew that she couldn't let their words affect her. She had found her strength in education. That was her escape, and she would not let anyone take it from her. Weeks passed, and Emma's progress became undeniable. Her grades improved, and she began to shine in the classroom. When the first term exams were announced, Emma was filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had studied relentlessly, but would it be enough? When the results came back, Emma's heart soared. She had placed in the top 3 of her class. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. She wasn't just the girl cleaning the floors and washing the dishes anymore. She was someone who mattered. The pride she felt was overwhelming. And as she sat quietly in the corner of the living room that evening, cleaning up after dinner, she allowed herself a moment of happiness. She had done it. Emma had made it this far. And nothing, not even the cruel treatment from her aunt and cousins, could take that away from her. Years passed, and Emma's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. Through sheer determination, she continued to excel in school, securing scholarship after scholarship, each one bringing her closer to her dream. By the time she was 18, Emma had earned a full scholarship to study business administration at the University of California, Berkeley. The girl who had once scrubbed floors and endured constant cruelty was now poised to take on the world. With the support of Mr. Adams and a few kind-hearted mentors, Emma's life took a dramatic turn. She worked part-time during college, saving every penny she could. But beyond just surviving, she had a vision. She wanted to create something of her own, a business that not only brought her success but also helped others. After years of hard work, Emma founded her own company, selling high-quality household products at affordable prices. What started as a small, humble business soon grew into a chain of stores. At 26, she bought a struggling shopping mall in downtown Los Angeles, turning it into one of the most successful and thriving malls in the city. Emma was no longer just the poor village girl. She was a businesswoman, a role model, and a symbol of resilience. Her success was not just measured in money or recognition but in the lessons she learned along the way. Through her struggles, Emma discovered the strength to keep going. No matter the odds, she had found her place in the world, and she was determined to lift others up with her. Thank you for following Emma's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow more life stories and inspiring tales of resilience. Stay tuned for our upcoming videos. And remember, no matter the challenges you face, hope and hard work can change your life.